Hey guys, so I'm going to give you some feedback on some of the test, not all of it, but some of the bigger questions. Okay, one of the questions was about Uganda, and it asked you to compare Uganda to the UK. You don't have to know anything about Uganda; it's all in the source already. What they're after you doing is pulling out information from the source. Not all of you did that. Quite a lot of you did, but not all of you. Some of you tried to comment without pulling out the specifics. What they're looking for are those specifics. So you're saying in Uganda it's illegal to be gay. And then the key word is whereas. Whereas in the UK, there are laws to prevent this kind of discrimination. In Uganda, they're encouraging people to report people for homosexuality, whereas in the UK, that would be considered discrimination under the Equality Act 2010. And that's the other key thing. You've got to start mentioning the legislation. Remember, it's an exam. You're showing off what you know. So you need to say to the examiner that you know about the Human Rights Act of 1998, that you know about the Equality Act of 2010. The other thing to do in there is pull out areas of the UK that perhaps people aren't getting their rights. So even though it's illegal to discriminate in the UK, it still goes on. So that could go in as part of your contrast as well. You can talk about the right to freedom of assembly. You can put a UDHR, things like that. The right to lobby. The fact they have the death penalty, which we don't have in the UK. But what we're looking at is these contrasts. They have that here, but not over here. They have that there, but not over here. And the key when you're doing that the whole time, key vocabulary and examples we've learned, legislation that we've learned, so that we can show off to Jenny that we know what we're on about. Okay. So this is the feedback to the second question. And in the second question, they said the central government is wrong to cut funding to local councils as it forces them to make cuts to necessary and popular services. That's it. It forces them to make cuts to necessary and popular services. Some of you argued about the pros and cons of making cuts, which is fine, but that's not what the question's saying. It's saying, are they wrong to make those cuts to the local council? So we're looking to see that you understand the difference between what the national government do and what the local government do, so that you can start to understand how they prioritise services. On the agree side, you could say things like, I agree that they're wrong to make those cuts because they are necessary services. Because the question phrased it that way. It says popular and necessary services. So what are those necessary services? You need to show the examiner you know the necessary services they provide. And that can be anything from refuse collection and stuff like that, right the way through to social care. Lots of care for the elderly in our community, lots of care in people's homes. This is local government stuff. But it's hugely necessary. You could carry on from that and say that if they make these cuts to local services, that vulnerable groups will be disproportionately affected. So some of the more vulnerable in society, they're the ones who use the libraries because they don't have access to internet at home. So when you close the libraries, you cut off people in society. The elderly are the same in that respect. You could try to bring in a bit more knowledge. If you want to show off a few words and you're trying to squeeze a few things in there, you can say one of the other groups that's affected maybe are children. And Article 4 of the CRC tells us that the government must consider the impact on children with every decision they make. You could talk about the long-term repercussions. Cuts to youth services might lead to increased crime later down the line. Same with education. On the disagree side, you can say you talk about how the government are running a deficit already. Because they're running a deficit, these cuts are necessary. Yes, they'll damage local communities, but there's no way around that. We can't keep running a deficit. We can't build up a higher debt. These debt repayments are costing us. If we didn't have them, we could use those debt repayments to invest instead in our local communities. You can talk about the alternatives to raise taxes. If they didn't make those cuts, they'd have to raise taxes, and that would be unpopular with the electorate. You can say how, well, look, not all these services are essential, whilst they or popular for that matter. So the local government can afford to make certain cuts because they're spending in areas that perhaps they don't need to. You could talk about how it's perhaps people's responsibility, society's responsibility, not the government's, to do everything. More of a right-wing ideology, the idea that with the shrinking of state, that the government aren't responsible for doing everything. Some things we have to do ourselves. The key to this question is, like all of these extended writing questions, arguing both sides. Some of you only focus on one side. You need to have really clear division. On the one hand, this is why the government are wrong to do it. On the other hand, this is why they're right. And you can flip between the two, but you must have that clear distinction between supporting and disagreeing with that statement. one or two of you could do with making your writing a little bit more formal, maybe, in the way that you try and show things off. Maybe start some of your paragraphs with cohesive conjunctions as well, just to make it flow a little better. And I don't know if it's just because of the way you submitted this, I don't know if you did this at home or not, but quite a few of you seem to be missing plans, and that was evident perhaps in your writing as well. You just kind of did a paragraph that was roughly about why it was okay, and a paragraph about why they shouldn't, and that was it. You need like 5 or 6 paragraphs for a big question like this. So you need to plan. What are the points I'm going to make on the one side? What are the points I'm going to make on the other? Then I'm going to break them down. I'm going to write each of those points as a paragraph, so I'm answering the question. And not all of you did that. You just had a couple of paragraphs. But whether that's because you weren't sure that's the approach you should take, or whether it's more because, hey, you're at home and you're a bit more chilled out, I don't know. Hopefully I haven't rambled, and that's of some use to some of you. I hope you're all well and happy, and I will see you all soon, hopefully.